Hey, just a heads up before we begin, these games have a lot of flashing lights in them, but the upcoming Arcade Classic Collection seems to have removed them, so you can play these games without a health scare. Still though, because that collection's not out yet, I'll be using footage from the original release, so viewer discretion is advised. The 90s has become an infamous time for comic book and superhero media, as well it featured some of the highest highs in terms of sales numbers, like X-Men #1 becoming the highest selling comic of all time. That boom of popularity also led to a lot of poor business decisions that led to the bubble to burst in the mid-90s. These characters would still find success in movies and animation, but the actual comics divisions of these companies would be in a slump. As for Capcom, most of the 90s was crazy profitable and lucrative for them, and a big part of that is thanks to the fighting game boom caused by their own Street Fighter 2. Along with updating that game, Capcom looked into producing more fighting games, like a prequel to the Street Fighter series called Street Fighter Alpha, and a whole new franchise based around spooky monsters called Darkstalkers. The big thing both of these franchises had in common was their speed and creativity. These games started cramming in more special moves, supers, and crazy combo potential compared to the seemingly more basic Street Fighter 2, and this sugar-high philosophy would carry into Capcom's first licensed fighting game. In order for Marvel Comics to recoup costs after the Great Comic Crash, more licensing deals had to be made with other companies, and with arcade games at their peak around the mid-90s, Marvel and Capcom collaborated once again, but instead of the Punisher beat-em-up, it would be an X-Men fighting game. And not just one fighting game based on Marvel characters, but two fighting games based on Marvel characters, as the initial deal between the two meant that these two games had to be developed around the same time, so X-Men Children of the Atom released first, with Marvel Superheroes coming out half a year later. First, let's review the X-Men fighting game. Loosely based on the 1993 comic storyline Fatal Attractions, Children of the Atom lets us pick between 10 X-Men themed characters. Of course, you have your good guys like Wolverine, Cyclops, Psylocke, Colossus, Iceman, and Storm, but we also have more antagonistic mutants like Omega Red, Spiral, and Silver Samurai. You can even play as the giant mutant-destroying robot Sentinel. With all these characters looking like superpowered, larger-than-life comic book heroes that use their powers to cause chaos or save the day, the core fighting had to reflect that philosophy. Luckily, thanks to the aforementioned Street Fighter Alpha and Darkstalkers, the Capcom devs had some framework to build upon for this game. You got your usual 6-button setup of 3 punches and 3 kicks, but the raw speed of the game is much faster, you can triple jump to ludicrous heights now, and the strength of your special attacks feels extra powerful than in other fighting games. The main character I play as, Cyclops, even lets you aim where his big laser super is going. If Darkstalkers invented the core formula for air-dashing 2D anime fighting games, the Children of the Atom took it to a whole new level. I was honestly surprised by how well this held up to my modern fighting game sensibilities, of how much fun me and my friend were having to get my thoughts solidified on this game. As for Marvel Superheroes, the sister game to Children of the Atom developed around the same time, I sadly didn't like it as much, but I can attribute that to the lack of Cyclops. I just really vibed with his moveset in Children of the Atom, so it was a struggle finding a mate in this game. Speaking of Children of the Atom, Wolverine, Psylocke, and bosses Juggernaut and Magneto return, but the main star attraction for this game's roster were all the big-name Marvel heroes making their fighting game debut, like Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, and Spider-Man, with some oddball villains thrown in like Blackheart and Shuma Gorath. Doctor Doom and Thanos are unplayable bosses in this game, which sucks for me because it just added salt in the wound that I don't have my main characters, as I love playing as those two in future fighting games they appear in. Well, at least we have an interesting universal mechanic exclusive to this game, the Infinity Gem system. From my understanding, what gems you get throughout the match are randomized, with you starting with one gem and can get more throughout the match through fighting, even being able to steal your opponent's gems. Then you can use meter alongside your gems to give yourself various busted buffs to help you win the match. I appreciate the uniqueness of this mechanic, and it does tie into the Infinity Gauntlet storyline they adapted for this game's arcade ladder, but the Infinity Gems feel a bit too random for my taste. I don't believe fighting games should worry about balancing themselves, but this feels a bit too luck-based for a 2D fighter. Granted, we live in the age of esports fighting games, and Marvel Superheroes was made in a more innocent time where fighting games just had to be fun over a competitive sport for tournament play, so I can't hate this system, but it doesn't mean I have to love it. It just proves another compounding factor of why I prefer Children of the Atom over Marvel Superheroes. Ultimately though, both games are fun fighters filled with pop and comic colors, so I can still recommend them to check them out for those who are interested in both comic book and fighting game history, especially as they would serve as the basis for the Marvel vs. Capcom series, which got set up as early as these games with secret Capcom characters being unlockable through cheat codes. Akuma from Street Fighter showed up in Children of the Atom, and Anita from Darkstalkers made her way against the Marvel Superheroes. These weren't the first crossovers in fighting games, I think SNK beat them to it, but these cameos did sow the seeds for what would become one of the more popular ones in fighting game history.